Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This story is a bit of a lengthy one and goes back to when I worked at a casino. For anyone out there who thinks it will be a great job, I can tell you right now it's not as glamorous as it seems, especially when you're working in the kitchen. Now for a little backstory so you can get the whole picture. When I started working at this location, I was young, still in college, working 2 part-time jobs. At first it was just okay. I had been hired as a steward, which is just a fancy term for a dishwasher. This wasn't too bad as it had been the same job I had at the last restaurant I had worked at. However, there were a few differences. I won't go into too much detail and name all of them, just the ones that are important to the story. The first one, and the one I liked the best, was that since there were so many restaurants and the stewards were all in one department, we were shuffled around every day. One day you will be working in a steakhouse, the next in a buffet, then the Italian restaurant, the sandwich shop in the bingo hall, and so on. This meant that they were always working with other people, interacting with them, and getting a change of scenery. I was told I was odd for liking this, but my counter was that if you ended up working with someone you didn't get along with, then it would only be a while until you worked with them again. The second was that this place was not fond of labor unions. Twice a year there would be a meeting that everyone had to attend, where they would make these long presentations on how negative and manipulative unions are. Also, there would be signs all along the employee halls with anti-union messages. After working for the casino for some time, my boss approached me asking if I wanted to switch from part-time to full-time. I said yes, as the benefits were really good. Not only did I get medical and dental insurance, but I would also get access to their lawyers, among a few other things. I guess it was a good thing that I did because a few months later, there were some major shakeups. I didn't know what caused it, but most everyone there disliked the new changes. For one thing, the sick note policy was cancelled, meaning if you were sick, it wouldn't matter if you had a note from your doctor stating that you couldn't work. If you didn't show up, they docked you a point. This resulted in cooks and stewards coming in, vomiting on the floor and in the trash cans because they couldn't afford to lose a point, as it would count against them when it came time for raises. Another change was that they were reducing the number of full-time employees. I was safe along with everyone else who had that status, but if any of us left, that slot would not be filled. There would only be 2 full-time employees per department. Speaking of departments, that leads me to the next big change. Technically, the stewarding department would be disbanded. This meant that while our supervisors would still be there, the chefs and managers of the restaurants would be in charge of us. This also meant that we would no longer be moving around. I was sent to the steakhouse and thankfully, I had 2 great female co-workers. In fact, we were so good that we were called AAA, as all our names began with the letter A. As we worked there, I began to plan on moving up within the casino. I knew it would be difficult, but I had a dream of buying my family's cabin from my parents and living up in the country while I finished college. Sadly, my first attempt at becoming a supervisor failed, and I ended up training the person who did get the job. I didn't complain, I just took it as a sign that I needed to up my game. Now here is where our story begins. See, our head chef was being transferred to the Italian restaurant, and the assistant chef was taking his place. This meant we were going to hire a new guy to take his place. Let's call the new guy Kevin. When Kevin first came in, he seemed okay. Not great or awful, he was just there. We had no real reason to talk most days, as we were usually pretty busy. Then maybe a month after Kevin started working there, I had my first real interaction with him, and it was something. It was at night, with a dinner rush just starting to pick up, and I told my co-workers that I was going to fill up my water bottle before it happened. They said okay and that they would begin doing the same once I got back. But before I could leave the steakhouse to go to the break room, Kevin called out to me, "Opie, where are you going?" "Just getting a drink before we get busy," I told the girls. Then why aren't you using the waitstaff drink fountain? Me blinking and confused. We were told when we started that staff are only supposed to get drinks from the break room. Don't give me that. I see the waitstaff getting drinks there all the time. You're just going there to waste time. I'm going to have to write you up for this. Wasting time? The break room is just down the hall. In the time we've spent having this conversation, I could have gone down there, filled my bottle with ice, gotten my drink, and gotten back here. Kevin then opened his mouth. But before he could say anything, the head chef caught sight of us standing there and came over to see what was going on. Before I could open my mouth, Kevin spoke up, explaining the whole thing with a superior look on his face. That, however, faded when the chef spoke. Kevin, OP is right. Employees are only supposed to use the drink fountains in a break room. I'm going to have to talk to the waitress supervisor about this. OP, go get your drink. I need to talk to Kevin in private. So I did. After that, I was pretty much confused by what just happened. At first, I was willing to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt, believing that he honestly didn't know about that rule, that maybe chefs and supervisors were allowed to use a waitstaff station, assuming that it applied to everyone. However, when I brought this up to my co-workers, they said similar things had happened with them, that he had pulled them over for a minor infraction of the rules, and when they just said they were sorry, he let them off with a warning. So they suggested that he was just marking his territory. It would have gone easier on me if I hadn't questioned his authority. It was after that, however, that I began noticing things. Firstly, the waitstaff was no longer talking with Kevin, as they were annoyed at him for getting the crackdowns at their station. It was during this time that I began to realize just how often he hung out with them. He was also always calling over my co-workers, asking them to help him with a job like peeling potatoes for hours, leaving me alone. And what's more, whenever I stopped to speak with one of my supervisors, who happened to be a young woman, he would yell at me to get back to work. Slowly I began to suspect that he had other intentions. These suspicions were later confirmed during that summer. For those of you who have never been in a professional kitchen, it can get hot. And in the summer, it can get really hot, and the odors can sometimes overpower you. On this day, I was working at one of our massive sinks, scraping out the remains of perch and giving the pans a deep clean when Kevin called me to the office. Now, this was odd, as I had only ever been called to the office to get my 10-cent raises while getting a performance evaluation, and neither of those were to happen until January. Curious, I followed him to the small room where he gestured for me to enter first. I did, finding a woman I had never met before sitting at one of the desks there. When I entered, she looked up from her work to give me a curious look that said, "Hello, can I help you?" You know the look. Then Kevin spoke as he shut the door, walking in backward as he did. "Oh, B, you stink." "Excuse me?" the woman said. At this, Kevin jumped before turning around. The woman was looking at him with rage, while Kevin looked lost. It didn't take me long to realize that he didn't know that she was in there. Kevin says, "Sorry, I misspoke. I meant he smelled bad. We're getting complaints about his BO." Now, like I said, the room was small. So small that I felt cramped being in there with two other people. With the way we were positioned, I was pretty close to the woman who was growing more annoyed. She says, "I don't smell anything, sir. Would you mind if I get a little closer?" I said it wouldn't be a problem and allowed her to get close enough to sniff me. She did it maybe 2 or 3 times before pulling away. "I don't smell anything." And that's when I spoke. "Look, if someone said I smell, then I'm sorry. But I'm working over greasy sinks full of chemicals to clean off pans with fried perch on them in a room that feels like 100 degrees. And on top of that, the aprons we were given are not the best." To emphasize my point, I gestured to my shirt, which was wet and full of bits and pieces of fish. The woman says, "I see. I'm going to have to take a look at those and see if any need replacing. OP, how about you cool down for a bit in the break room? Kevin, you stay. We need to have a talk." After that, 3 things happened. The first was that the stewards got new aprons, which made all of us happy as they hadn't been replaced in years. Second, from then on, if Kevin wanted to talk to me about an issue, Another staff member had to be there as a witness, and if there wasn't one, I was to find that woman who I learned was a steakhouse manager. Third, all bets were off between me and Kevin. While he couldn't pull me to the side like that, he did start yelling at me whenever he could in public. If he caught me standing around, like when I was waiting for the dishwasher to fill up, he would yell at me to get back to work from across the room before going back to talk to one of the girls. He would just berate me for any little thing he could, just to make me miserable. Soon I came to realize that he saw me as an obstacle between himself and all the female staff members, as I was on good terms with all of them. I even wondered if he thought I was like a harem protagonist based on how many I worked with. For over the next year, I tried everything in my power to stop him while still trying to get that supervisor position. I went to human resources, writing up complaints only for them to ask, "What do you want us to do about this?" But when I went to my head supervisor, he just said that I needed thicker skin. It seemed like every day it just got worse. On top of that, my identity was stolen twice. The first, targeting my bank account, while the second one was my tax return. With the bank refusing to help and a legal department of the casino dragging their feet to help me, I was in a red for a long time, making my situation all the worse. There would be days when I would have to collect cans in the break room for gas and had to give away one of my cats. And with Kevin adding to my stress, there were days when I honestly thought about ending my own life. Thankfully, there were good people still around. A bunch of my co-workers banded together to give me small packs of food, and some of the lying cooks helped sneak out some meats that they were about to throw away. Then came the big night. It had been a concert night, on one of the coldest nights of the year. So cold that several keys had snapped in the door locks because they had frozen shut. I had managed to get to my car and turn it on, leaving it running for a couple of minutes as I headed back to the locker room in order to enjoy my only comfort left, a book. The plan was to just read a couple of pages and then I would be out of there. But before I could get past my first paragraph, the doors to the locker room opened and there strode in Kevin. He looked around for a moment before his eyes fell on me, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. "Who told you you could punch out, OP? Not me, that's for sure. I just got a complaint from the night crew saying that your dishwasher is a mess. Clearly you didn't clean it at all. Now you go back there and clean it right now. And I better not see you punching in or else you'll be fired." With that, he strode out of the room laughing. For a moment I just sat there in utter confusion, wondering if he could do that. I felt scared because if I lost my job, then I wouldn't know what to do. I was behind on my student loans, I had to drop out of college by this point due to various reasons, behind on paying my parents' rent, and could barely afford to keep the one cat I kept who had been abandoned. For the first time in years I felt so overwhelmed with fear that I felt like I could begin crying at any moment. Then the moment passed, and I was furious. This guy had been doing this for me for too long. It didn't matter if he could or couldn't, I was done with this. I had to get out of there. As I stood up, I found myself making a plan fueled by my rage. I had kept the fact that my identity had been stolen from my parents, partly out of shame and partly out of pride, as I wanted to get myself out of this mess. Well, no more. I was going to tell them about it and ask if I could move back in with them. I would even ask for help looking for a new job down there. Sure, it would mean losing my dream home in the country, but at this point, being stable was more important. But before I could do anything, another thought crossed my mind, making me smile. He wanted me to wash the dishwasher right now without punching back in? Okay, I'll do just that. So I left the locker room, barely hearing the security guard stationed nearby as he called out to me. No, I ignored him and everyone else as I mentally prepared myself to do this. When I got to the kitchen, there were piles of dishes, pots, pans, and a slew of other items that needed to be cleaned in quantities that are only ever seen on concert nights. But I ignored that as well, as the three stewards who were working hard, shutting down the machine and emptying it. The night steward asks me, "What are you doing?" "Sorry, but Kevin told me that you told him that no one had cleaned the dishwasher and that it was a mess, so much so that I had to come back and clean it without even punching in, or else I would be fired. The color on everyone's faces drained. When the first person managed to compose himself, he told me that none of them had seen Kevin and that the machine was perfectly clean when they arrived. Now hearing this did make me feel bad, as what I was doing would put them behind. But Kevin told me to do this, so I was following it to the letter, while also making sure everyone there knew who sent me. Seeing that I wasn't going to stop, not that it mattered at this point, as the machine had been drained, one of them went to get the night supervisor. While he was gone, the other two began to argue with each other over whether or not Kevin could order us to stay past our shifts and fire us if we refused. It didn't help that the casino had this nasty habit of offering employees a room to stay in when the roads were snowed over, only to make them work all night as they were on call. When the night supervisor came, she asked me what was going on, and I repeated my story while cleaning the machine. She said that Kevin had not spoken to her and was gone before stating that he doesn't have the power to fire me. I just told her that I really couldn't take the chance. Then I asked her how to put in my 2-week notice. That confused her even more, asking why I was doing this if I was just planning on leaving anyway. I told her that I would need time to make arrangements for my future and that getting one last paycheck was really important. So I wrote up my 2-week notice, even mentioning why I was leaving before hitting the road. When I got home, it was 3 a.m. It was all the rage now out of my system. I just crashed onto my bed with my uniform still on. The next morning I was awoken by the sound of my phone ringing. It was a casino. The head stewarding supervisor was asking if I could come in and talk about last night. At first I told him no, that I couldn't come in early just to come back home. However, he said it was important. Curious, I told him I would be there in an hour or two. When I arrived, I was taken back to the steakhouse office to find it crammed with people. The night supervisor was still there. The night security officer was there. My supervisors were there. Several head chefs were there. And the steakhouse manager was there, looking like her face would erupt into flames at any moment as she stared at the one figure who was sitting. It was Kevin, hunched over in his seat, looking like a child who was in time out. I was then told that they knew what had happened. After I had my talk with the night supervisor, she went to security and found footage of Kevin looking out the door before heading towards the locker room and finishing off with him leaving with a grin, minutes before I left the room. After that, she called Kevin to show up the next morning. He tried to lie his way out of this, stating that it never happened and I was just lying to get him into trouble. Supervisors then said that it was a simple matter to check, as they had a security guard that was by the room and that they can check the footage. Instantly, he remembered that he had spoken to me, only I had misheard him, and that he would never tell me to work without punching in. The night supervisor and the others in the room then asked, why would OP lie? Who told you that the machine needed cleaning? Why would he be the only one who needs permission to leave? And so on. Over and over, Kevin tried to lie, only to change his story again and again until finally he realized he had been caught. The steakhouse manager then turned to me before apologizing, asking if I would consider staying. The head manager also apologized, asking the same. For a moment I was going to say no, but then I had a stupid idea that if I did this, then I might have a shot at becoming a supervisor myself and not have to leave. So I said sure, but only if Kevin never talks to me again. If he has a problem with what I'm doing, he'll have to run it by the head chef unless it's an emergency. And they agreed. Later, I heard a few stories on why they finally acted. The first and least likely, in my opinion, was that this incident finally caused someone higher in the food chain to notice all the written complaints I had on Kevin and was demanding answers. The second was that they didn't want to lose me just yet. Remember how I said that we used to move around from area to area? Well, it turns out there were now only 2 employees who knew how to work in every restaurant, meaning I could go into any area and know instantly where everything goes and how that area operates without wasting anyone's time. but the most likely reason was due to the labor union. News about what had happened the night before had spread throughout the casino faster than I could ever have imagined. And if they didn't take care of this, there was a greater chance that the union representatives would seize on us. In the end, I stayed in the steakhouse longer than Kevin did, as he left 2 years later. But before he did, I offered to throw a pizza party for everyone the day after he left. I've always thought I lived in a nice neighborhood, but there is one thing that really gets under my skin: our trashy homeowners association. The president, Karen, is an absolute nightmare of a woman. Let me tell you what happened. A few months back, my mom got really sick. She'd been battling lung cancer for years, but it suddenly took a turn for the worse. The doctors found it had spread to her brain, and she needed multiple surgeries and treatments. Being her only child and with my dad long gone, I knew I had to step up. I emptied my savings and maxed out my credit cards to cover all her medical expenses. It hit my finances hard, but what else could I do? She was all I had left in this world. Despite everything, my mom didn't make it. Her passing left a huge hole in my life, and I was in a dark place for weeks, barely able to function. One night, a massive storm rolled through our area. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when I heard an earth-shattering crack followed by a deafening crash. I ran outside to find a giant oak tree had been struck by lightning and fallen right through my roof. It had taken out a good chunk of my living room and kitchen. As I stood there in the rain staring at the destruction, I felt utterly defeated. I knew I needed to start repairs right away, but I was completely tapped out financially. I had no idea how I was going to manage this. The next morning, as I was surveying the damage, Karen from the Homeowners Association came marching up to my driveway. She took one look at the tree and started in on me. This is unacceptable. You need to get this cleaned up immediately. I know it looks bad, Karen, and I'm working on it. Working on it isn't good enough. Do you have any idea what this will do to our property values? We can't have the neighborhood looking like this. Look, I just lost my mother. I spent everything I had on her medical bills. I literally don't have the money to fix this right now. That's not my problem. You have a responsibility to maintain your property. If you can't afford to live here, maybe you should consider moving somewhere else, more suitable for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was about to tell her exactly where she could stick her property values when my neighbor Nick came over. Everything okay over here? Certainly not. This eyesore needs to be dealt with immediately. Come on, Karen. Give the guy a break. He's been through hell lately. Rules are rules. I expect to see progress on this within a week, or I'll be forced to take action. With that, she stormed off. Nick gave me a sympathetic look and offered to help however he could. I thanked him, but I knew this was my problem to solve. Over the next few days, I looked into my options. I didn't qualify for a personal loan due to my recent financial troubles. My insurance company was dragging its feet on approving my claim. I was at a loss. A week later, I came home from work to find a crew of workers in my yard, cutting up a fallen tree. Karen was standing on a sidewalk, arms crossed, overseeing the whole operation. What the hell is going on here? Since you refuse to take care of this yourself, I've arranged for the Homeowners Association to handle this. And I never agreed to this. You can't just send people onto my property without my permission. Actually, I can. It's in the bylaws. You're in violation of multiple codes, and as president, I have the authority to remedy the situation. And who's paying for this? You are, of course. The Homeowners Association will cover the initial cost, but it will be added to your dues. I already told you I can't afford this right now. Then I suggest you figure it out quickly. The bill for this will be $5,000, due within 30 days. If you fail to pay, we'll be forced to put a lien on your house. I was speechless. I watched helplessly as the workers finished cutting up the tree and hauling it away. When they were done, Karen handed me an invoice with a smug smile. There, doesn't the neighborhood look so much better now? Get off my property now, before I call the police. No need to be hostile. I'm only looking out for everyone's best interests. I said leave, now. As she walked away, I heard her mutter something about ungrateful people. I was shaking with anger as I went inside. How was I going to come up with $5,000 in a month? I barely had enough to cover my basic living expenses. The next few weeks were a blur of stress and anxiety. I picked up extra shifts at work and sold everything of value I could find in the house. I even considered selling my car and biking to work, but it still wasn't enough. I was outside one Saturday patching up my roof as best as I could when I heard a commotion down the street. Curious, I climbed down and walked over to see what was going on. A crowd had gathered around Karen's house, and there were police cars and fire trucks everywhere. As I got closer, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a massive hole in Karen's roof, and debris was scattered all over her perfectly manicured lawn. In the middle of it was what looked like a large piece of metal. I overheard one of the officers explaining the situation to a neighbor. It appears to be a landing gear door from a commercial airliner. The airline reported an issue with one of their planes about an hour ago. By some miracle, it managed to fall here without hitting anyone. I couldn't help but laugh. Of all the houses in our neighborhood, this piece of plane just happened to fall on Karen's. The irony was almost too much. A few hours later, Karen's car came screeching into the driveway. She had been on vacation with her family and cut it short when she got the news. As soon as she saw her house, she started screaming, "My house! My beautiful house! This is a disaster! Who's responsible for this? I'll sue them for every penny they have." Her husband tried to calm her down, but she was having none of it. "Don't tell me to calm down. Do you see this? Our home is ruined. What about our property values now?" I couldn't help but smirk as I watched her meltdown. It was pity, I know, but after everything she put me through, it felt like justice. Over the next few days, the neighborhood was abuzz with gossip about Karen's misfortune. Many people seemed to think it was karmic retribution for her years of bullying and micromanaging everyone through the Homeowners Association. A week after the incident, I was surprised to find an envelope in my mailbox from the Homeowners Association. Inside was a letter stating that due to unforeseen circumstances, they will be covering the cost of my tree removal and roof repair. The $5,000 bill had been waived. I later learned that several of my neighbors had banded together and threatened to sue the Homeowners Association for Karen's actions. They argued that she had overstepped her authority and violated several of our community's bylaws. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy legal battle, the board had decided to back down. As for Karen, she spent the next several months battling with her insurance company and trying to sue the airline. Last I heard, she hadn't seen a dime yet. Her house was still under repair, covered in tarps, and surrounded by construction equipment. Every time I drove past, I couldn't help but smile a little. In the end, I was able to get my house fully repaired. I took out a small loan to cover what insurance wouldn't, but it was manageable. More importantly, Karen's reign of terror over our neighborhood seemed to be at an end. The HOA board voted to remove her as president, citing her recent personal distractions as a reason. Life in our community has been much more peaceful since then. We still have a homeowners association, but the new leadership is far more reasonable and understanding. They've even started a community fund to help residents who fall on hard times, something I wished had existed when I was struggling. As for me, I'm doing much better these days. The loss of my mom still hurts, but I'm finding ways to honor her memory and move forward. My house is fixed up, my finances are slowly recovering, and I've made some good friends among my neighbors through this whole ordeal. And Karen? Well, let's just say she's a lot quieter these days when she walks past my house. I guess having a plane part fall through your roof can really change your perspective of what's truly important in life. A few weeks ago, I was browsing Marketplace for a suitcase for my 2-year-old. We had a family holiday coming up and I wanted to get my little one their own luggage. I stumbled upon this cute little suitcase that seemed perfect. The seller was asking for $50, but I thought I'd try my luck and offered $40. And to my surprise, they accepted. I drove over to their place, handed over the cash, and headed home with a suitcase. Job done. Or so I thought. Fast forward to a few days, our holiday was approaching, so I decided to clean the suitcase before packing. I unzipped it, and lo and behold, there were a few items inside that clearly weren't mine. A small toy car, a hair clip, and a colorful bracelet. Nothing valuable, but definitely not mine. Being the decent person I am, I took a picture and sent it to the seller. Hey, hope you're doing well. I found these things in a suitcase. What do you want me to do with them? Do you want them back? Oh, I forgot to check inside. Yes, I'd like them back, please. No problem, I can send them by post, and you can pay on delivery. I don't get home until late, so I wouldn't be able to pay upon delivery. Okay, how about you pick them up from my house? Or you could arrange a courier, and I'll make myself available for the pickup. Well, since you paid less than what I was asking for, it's only fair that you pay for the postage. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Was this person serious? That's not going to happen. I made an offer that you accepted. You could have declined it, but you didn't. I am doing the decent thing by letting you know I found these items. I am not going to go out of my way and pay for something that isn't my responsibility. Fine, then just throw them away. At this point, I was fuming. The audacity of this person was unreal. I had gone out of my way to contact them about their forgotten items, offered multiple solutions, and this was how they responded? Are you sure you want me to throw away your belongings? Yes, just bin them. It's not really worth the hassle. Alright, if that's what you want. And that was it. I ended up throwing away the items as requested. But the whole situation left a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, who does that? Who forgets to check a suitcase before selling it, then expects the buyer to pay for shipping their forgotten items back? I kept thinking about how this person must operate in their daily life. Do they always expect others to clean up their messes? Do they think the world owes them something? The next day I was still annoyed about the whole thing, so I decided to vent to my friend Megan over coffee. Can you believe this person? I tried to do the right thing and they had the nerve to ask me to pay for shipping. That's crazy. Some people just have no shame. I know, right? And then they just told me to throw away their stuff like it was nothing. Well, at least you tried. You did more than most people would have done. True, but it just bugs me that there are people like this out there. Unfortunately, there always will be. You just have to focus on being the better person. She was right, of course. I knew I had done the right thing by reaching out and offering to return the items. It wasn't my fault that the seller turned out to be so entitled